We're really lucky today to have the assistant editors from Everything Everywhere All at Once, Zoe Mao and Aashish Mayo. They used Adobe Premiere and Frame.io to work out all this complicated workflow. And I'm just amazed to think about how complicated that timeline must have been and how they managed all those different formats, all the different aspect ratios, the speed ramping, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to hear all about that. Tell us a little bit first about yourselves and how you got started.
I went to AFI for editing, and since graduation, I've been working on indie features, cutting shorts for a while, and yeah, work my way in the union, and it's been an assistant editor and editor for almost 6 years now.
And you work pretty closely with this guy, don't you?
Yes, yes, he's my classmate and my boyfriend.
You can admit it. You can admit it. Tell us about your background. So
yeah,
you must have gone to AFI as well.
I went to AFI as well, yeah, for editing, and have been working, starting with indie stuff. I edited and assistant edited on stuff. Edited a few shorts, did some editing on a couple of features, and worked my way into the union, and now, that's how we landed up here.
How did you tie up with the editor of this movie? Tell us about that.
So Paul used to work for AFI Fast, and that's how he got the connection with the AFI editing discipline. I got an email from our school, our editing facilities manager, actually, Tony, saying there is a feature looking for an AE. So I went in to do the interview, and I got the job. When I interviewed him, I don't believe he was. And I was lucky enough to meet the Daniels the day I was doing my interview with Paul.
Okay, the Dan.
Yeah.
That would be co-directors, and what's their full name?
Daniel Kwan and Daniel Shiner.
They've been working together for years.
For, I believe, 13 years. Yeah.
This is the second. This was the second feature. They've mostly worked in commercials and music videos.
And you worked on another project with them, or is
This is the first one with them, too. Yeah.
All right, so let's get down to the technical stuff. And I know you have some of your timelines and things to show us.
Yeah.
So why don't you take that away? And
we have some PDFs with screenshots and stuff because a lot of the drives with the media were shipped to A24. That was like 2 years ago. But yeah, so excuse us if you'll see some of our media offline. Not bad AEs.
Yeah. I'll start with. I want to start with how we organize the project. I know that's a lot of people are very interested in it. I guess the special part about our film is because everyone knows how complicated the film is. So when we do organizing, we came up with some really creative ways to help the team to get through all the footages. So this is how the Premiere production was set up. As you can see, so this is within Premiere, but it's almost like an Avid project. But this is where all the projects are saved.
So the function of Premiere Productions was very new when we were working on the movie.
Yeah.
Adobe actually gave us a beta version of Premiere to use. Zoe went to Adobe to learn some of the features and stuff of productions.
Yeah. To give a brief description, so for people who know how to use Avid, think the Premiere production as your Avid project. And all the bins in Avid is actually individual Premiere projects in the production folder. So when you open this Premiere production folder, you actually aren't opening any actual projects yet. And then once you open individual project, the projects actually function sort of like bins, but they're actually still Premiere projects. But this function helps. Premiere projects tend to get really large, and it's gonna take you, 45 minutes to open it. So this helps to break down the project, so projects get smaller, so it's lighter, so it's quicker to open each one of them. And it also helps to solve the duplication situation with the either master clips or multicam clips, but sequences still is going to get duplicated. That's something Premiere hasn't figured it out.
Yeah, so I think before this, because the media is sort of all linked across all the projects in a production, yeah, it helps things like, for example, if you have an in and out point set on a master clip, like in the old version of Premiere, you would try to bring it in from another project, even if it was the same clip. Because there was an in and out on it, Premiere would read it as a different clip and it would sort of duplicate it. But in this situation, we had all the media just in one place. And so we could use it in as many projects as we wanted without stuff being duplicated across projects.
I think one interesting thing is that this was all done remote. This movie was done in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And you had how many people put their hands in it? You had not only the editor, but the directors like to edit.
Yeah.
So we have how you did that too.
Yeah, so we have 3 people editing, 2 people assistant. So Paul is the editor, and the Daniel's also dabbling a little bit too. And then there is 5 VFX artists, which is our VFX team because we didn't have a vendor. So it's between me and Aashish. We are 2 of us supporting everybody. Aashish primarily for VFX team and also helping me. And I'm primarily for editorial, also help him sometimes. So we were lucky that our principal finished the day before the lockdown happened. So March 14th was our last principal day. Actually, the next day is supposed to be a green screen day, but because the lockdown happened, so we didn't have that day. But because all the principals were done, so I was able to just prepare a bunch of hard drives. So all the large files were already copied onto each individual hard drives, and we were using Residual Sync to link up all the drives, to sync up small files like music piece or sound effects or any sort of documents. And because it was so new for me for the remote workflow, after consulting Adobe, they suggest us do not put any Premiere project productions on any sort of like cloud-based system. So we were working off of local drives. So I would just pass project back and forth. So let's say Daniel Kwan cut a little piece, he would send it to me as a project. I would then put it into Paul's project for Paul to take a look at it. So Aashish and I are the one who knows Premiere production the most because we're the one who learned it. They actually didn't. So a lot of the things they don't really know how to navigate. But when it comes to edit, like within each individual Premiere project, you work exactly like how you use Premiere. So we were the one who were doing a lot of the maintenance in the background.
And how did you communicate?
Slack. Slack all the time, yeah.
And Frame.io?
Frame.io for reviews. In early days, before Evercast entered the frame, we were using Frame.io a lot. We would post cut on Frame.io, and the Daniels would leave notes, and then Paul would address them. And then for you was VFX.
Yeah, for VFX, I mean, the idea of using Resilio Sync to sync files across all of our drives actually came from our VFX supervisor, Zach. He was also one of the artists. And he's like obsessed with organization, which was great for us because it was so easy for things to just be thrown out of gear. So yeah, we would use Resilio Sync to keep all our drives in sync. And as you said, like only just very small files because we had already shot most of the footage before we went remote. So everyone had their own set of all the footage. Yeah.
So that's pretty much how we just communicate and just back and forth.
Yeah, it was mostly just Slack.
Yeah.
A little bit of Dropbox when Resilio was too slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see some of these timelines. That must be pretty crazy.
Yeah, well,
all the elements.
Yeah, we have some of like how the projects were set up.
So I don't know if everyone can see on the left-hand side. So because our film was like so complicated, I didn't organize by regular scenes. I was actually organizing all the footages by chunks. So scene 1 to 11 or scene 14 to 17, because these scenes are all connected. So instead of like organizing them by individual scenes, which is actually not helpful, I just put them as like a mini sequence, like how many scenes together is a mini sequence. And on the right-hand side is basically what's happening within each individual project.
So the sound.
So even for this, yeah, as you guys can see, for the SF for sound effects, I didn't organize it based on like scenes. Everything is category because we have so many like, universe. So we would categorize like all the sound effects, like so that it's easy to look through it.
Yeah, and also one more thing about productions while we're on the screenshot. If you can see right here, there's a lock symbol on this project. So that means Paul is using it. Like if you're using a shared storage situation, then if you have a production synced on that shared storage, then multiple people can use it. And it shows you when someone else is using that project, so it doesn't end up overwritten by you or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, this screenshot was from a pretty early stage when we were still in the office before we went remote.
Yeah. And this is within one of our reels. So for these, Paul cuts from string out. So I have like current cut on the top. So I only keep the latest cut in there because every day there's so many versions of a cuts. I would back them up somewhere else so they always have a way to track back. But just to keep things clear, under current cut, usually there's just one sequence. And then this picture is pretty interesting, especially on the right-hand side. As you guys can see, all the clips has descriptions on it because we have so much footages. So instead of just putting like SC104-1, I would spell it out like what exactly is happening in that clip. And also if it's multicam, I would do the / what camera are there. Because for Premiere, unlike Avid, you can tell which is a multicam clip, what is a single clip. In Premiere, you can't really tell if because even if it's a single cam, it's a multicam sequence. Yeah. So you can't really tell if there's one camera in it or two cameras. So I would spell it out loud so it's easy for people to see it.
Adobe recommended, and I think they've published this in their like workflow recently, but they did recommend that even if a scene had a single camera, we still sync it into a multicam clip. So it preserves all the metadata when we have to flatten stuff, or we can always step into the clip and see the time code and stuff. Nothing sort of gets overwritten by the other, like in a clip situation.
Yeah, and on the left-hand side, this image is basically, as I said, Paul cuts with string outs. So it's quite a work for me, but I think it's really useful. On the top, it's the traditional like string out just by like scenes.
There's chunks of scenes, and then there's individual scenes as well.
Exactly, and then in the middle part, you guys can see there is a fight, which is I basically put all the footage from one fight together, and then the bottom is by universe. So like if he want to look for something, because we have so much intercutting, sometimes he want to find a piece of footage from a specific universe, he can just go to that universe to find it. Yeah.
And mixing all those aspect ratios.
Yes.
Speed ramps and all into one scene.
Yeah.
Into one fight. It must be crazy.
Yeah. So on the right-hand side, that's basically how the strain out looks like, the screen out I create for Paul. The brown color is how I color-coded everything that's a circle take. And then the red markers and white markers I indicate when is the start, when it's cut, because the Daniels do a lot of rolling takes. It saves time. So I try to like mark as clear as possible so Paul doesn't have to go through a lot of the stuff.
And there's like a red marker and a white marker, I think.
Red is the action, and white is when is the cut.
As I said, don't mind the offline media. This is essentially how we would sync clips that were overcranked, that were shot overcranked. So in this case, it was probably shot 48 FPS or 47 point something FPS. So after doing a little bit of math, we, across the different frame rates, we had stuff starting from like 4 FPS to like 120 FPS.
192.
Sorry, yeah, okay, even better.
Yeah.
So like, we would, depending on how the speed of at which they were shot, we would slow them down or speed them up, because a lot of the time, in fact, most of the time, there was audio being recorded with it, so it really needed to be synced up. So we would initially just make an endpoint.
At the slate?
Yeah, at the slate and on the audio. Yeah, exactly, on the slate for the picture and the sound, and then sync it up. But of course, it would drift because we weren't able to adjust the speed before doing that. So once we synced that one clip up, we would step into the multicam clip and then adjust, plus minus how much percentage we wanted to speed up or slow down.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was
with constant changes too.
Yeah. I mean,
from 3 different editors, basically, at a time.
yeah, these were for our dailies. So like, yeah, the Daniels and Paul would pretty much use them. You know, they would sometimes take the clips out of the multicam sequences and then like do their own stuff with it in the edit. Yeah, so this is kind of an example of that. So this scene, this is the butt plug fight scene. Yes. So these are some screenshots from that. So this is the kind of speed ramping that the Daniels and Paul used to do.
Yeah, so all the little markers that you guys can see on the video clip. So yeah, those things are basically just speed changes. So they are keyframed speed change with remapping. There is slow down, speed up, like at the same time happening within the same clip.
And it's not just you're going from 50% to 120% of speed ramping. It also like they've also adjusted over here. This is sort of how gradual the speed ramping is. So I think a few years ago, Premiere made it like much easier to do that. It was kind of tedious before that, but I think now it's as easy as just pulling those two nodes apart, and it makes the speed change more gradual or more sharp.
They probably learned a lot from you guys. How did you settle on Premiere?
Paul and the Daniels chose them. Paul was primarily cutting in Premiere, and so is the Daniels. They also use After Effects a lot, so they were just
keep it in the same platform.
Yeah, exactly.
We were both trained in Avid, and we're kind of self-taught in Premiere. So like Avid was more comfortable, I guess, for us at that time. But Premiere was the fun thing about Premiere is like you can just do whatever you want with it. Whereas Avid tries to force you into doing something, which is great for finishing, because it's more compatible with different vendors and stuff. But with Premiere, it kind of just allows you to go crazy and do stuff like this, which is also possible in Avid, but it probably takes a little more time.
Yeah. It's a little bit more difficult to do in Avid. Like Avid is amazing when it comes to finishing. Avid is, overall speaking, a much more stable, professional software when it comes to editing. But Premiere really gives editor the freedom to be creative, like to do almost like whatever you want to do. Not mentioning you have the dynamic link with all the other softwares from Adobe family. So Premiere is probably a nightmare to finish with. But yeah, when you're
we'll come to that. We'll come to the finishing part.
When you're edit with it, it's really cool. It's
good for some projects.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Like, and
maybe not for everything.
Yeah, for this, I mean, the Daniels only knew Premiere, and they're very hands-on. So that was pretty much our only option.
I know we mentioned in a lot of other interviews, we talked about how like we had a lot of nest sequence in terms of like why we choose to online ourselves, just to show a little taste.
So like, for example, we have this sequence over here, which is a 250%. It has a 250% speed ramp on it. However, when you step into that sequence, what you see is there's clips that already have a 750% speed ramp on them. And within those multicam clips, those were probably shot at 48 FPS or something.
Yeah, so like it's a 200 on the clip itself.
Yeah.
And then 750 on the multicam sequence, and then a 250 on the nest.
And we just have a random export in here. That happened. So so it was a lot of this kind of stuff where like doing the math on it, like we weren't capable of doing that, and I think we managed to break Premiere a couple of times with all this stuff. So again,
you did your own conform, right?
Yes, exactly.
So that probably because of the pandemic, that would have been difficult to go out of house, in like a normal DI, right?
Well, we did had a phone call with Technicolor, but after me and Aashish told them what's the situation, that they were quiet for like 10 to 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And then they were like, they said, have you guys thought about doing it yourself? And we were like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, because we're so used to doing like indie projects. We would always conform stuff ourselves, whether it was an Avid or Premiere. We knew DaVinci Resolve. We would always take it into that.
Yeah.
There was not much that was new to us about this. It's just the scale of it was so massive in this case. And yeah, like we had all the raw footage with us. at our apartment. So we were able to just pull stuff from there whenever we wanted. We didn't have to go through a DI house, like pretty much at all.
Yeah. I know it's not really great in a way, like the color space, like the way we have to link it back. But I guess for a professional, if let's say we do online and in Technicolor, they might be able to check all the color space if it's correct and everything. I guess for our little film, like I guess we have to risk that to not maybe check the color space, but just make sure we can online it, because we either finish the film maybe not in the perfect color space, or we don't finish the film, like or with a lot of like inaccuracy, because we tried to export, like we try to flatten it doing the traditional way, try to flatten it, and then try to export it either at EDL or AF, bring it into DaVinci Resolve, try to see if we can online it. First of all, to flatten it was a nightmare. Clips was disappearing left to right, or it wasn't linking to, or like it wasn't landed at the right parts of the clip. It was just all sorts of problem. And as you guys can see, all those like keyframes, there was really no way for us to make sure like the frame was like accurate, like we're not touching the edit.
Yeah, and there were many situations where we had all those speed changes, and we also had like a bunch of scaling changes, position changes, and the stabilization on top of everything.
Yeah.
So like after a certain point, like we would try to flatten the clip, and Premiere would just be like, I don't know
what to do. So they just the clip would
and
just
it would just disappear.
The clip would just disappear.
Or sometimes it would be kind of inaccurate, like the frames would just move. It would move by like a second or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, we decided like the best way for us to preserve everything exactly the way we see it in the edit was just to sort of do the conform ourselves within Premiere.
Yeah.
And that kind of
For deliverables, they have to fix everything anyway. So
back
then, right?
like you mean?
There'll be a few things when they have to go deliverables and they have to have, QC and all that.
Oh yeah. Well, we did. So our color house was Color Collective in New York, but we did have to, like, Technicolor was acting as kind of a go-between. So like whenever we would, we did these initial turnovers to them, and they kept that, and then we would drop in VFX shots. Luckily our edit did not change after we conformed at all. So Technicolor was, dropping stuff in, and then they would pass it off to Color Collective, to Alex Bickle. And yeah, so they all, like, Technicolor was then sort of handling, QC and all of that. We didn't have to like export everything from our end again. Yeah, a little more about like the conform stuff. So this is essentially what
we cleaned it up. That's how it looks out.
Our sequence, and it still doesn't look great.
Yeah.
Because we had multiple aspect ratios. We would just drop in like PNG mats above everything whenever there was a change in the aspect ratio.
Yeah.
And then we had subtitles as well.
Yeah. So the toppest layer is the Rock Universe graphics, those lines of graphics.
Yeah, this stuff right here, that's, this is in Reel 6. So there's like a small bit of the Rock Universe that happens there.
Yeah.
And then
the next layer is all the subtitles, which we created. The subtitles for our film was created by us too.
In Photoshop.
Yeah. So that layer was all subtitles, and the layer next to the layer underneath that is all the aspect ratios. So we have 2:1, 185, 239, and 4:3. And sometimes within each scene, these 4 aspect ratios shows up all the time, and that they're just cut in between. So that's why the mats are like all over the places. So this is Paul's edit. So like, as you guys, this is what Paul's timeline was when we picture log for.
This is the audio. Yeah.
Audio for Reel 6.
And then we sort of just separated it a little bit into dialogue, sound effects, music, the usual stuff for the turnover.
Yeah.
We also ended up having to cut in every single track of every single clip because our sound house was they were just worried that the real information might not always translate because of how complicated it was. We had a lot of volume automation going on, a lot of pitch ups, pitch downs, stuff like that. A lot of speed, just speed changes and things. This just gives you an idea of how we sort of clean it up a little bit.
Yeah.
How long did this project take you to edit?
We were on it, like you were on it first, so you were on it from...
So 2020 late January, early February was our beginning of the shoot. We picture lock, I believe...
March 2021.
That's pretty quick for this application.
I guess because we had a small team, so like they were able to spread out the budget a little more. I guess I don't know. But yeah, that's how long it took. We were on it like until July 2021 because just dealing with VFX constantly coming in, QCs and stuff like that. Submitting fixes for that, yeah. So the online thing, what we did was, as I said, we had so much stuff going on in the edit with speed changes, scaling changes, stabilizations, everything you could imagine, really. So we decided to not even flatten any of the clips because that would just drive Premiere crazy. What we ended up doing was upscaling everything.
So essentially, say this is the timeline. So what we would do is we would select all the video clip, and then we would right-click and say offline media. So now everything is all unlinked from the proxy.
Actually, yeah, it's not. I mean, it was a little more complicated. We would actually step into every single multicam clip, unlink the clip within that, which is like the lowest level you can go.
So this is where you step in. So you would step into each individual clip, and you would unlink the top two, which is the videos.
Yeah, and then we would relink it, point it to our online drive with all the raw footage. So we would do this for like every single multicam clip, right. For like everything within every single multicam clip.
So every single timeline, with every single sequence, including the multicam sequence, you would open this sequence settings in Premiere, and then in the middle part where there says frame sizes, right now is our offline size.
Yeah, our offline was in 1998 by 1080, which is a 1:8:5 aspect ratio, because that was like our maximum sort of frame size or container size. And then we would change it to 3996 by 2160.
That basically bring it to the 4K size.
Yeah, while preserving the aspect ratio. So we didn't have to do any repositioning. That's what we found. Like if we change the resolution while preserving our aspect ratio, we don't have to do any repositioning of any of the clips. We just have to change the scale. Because in Premiere, the way it works is like it just does a center fit. It doesn't move things around. Yeah, we had this cheat sheet, which we used for VFX, which is like a whole nother story. But essentially, these are most of the kinds of footage that we had.
Yeah.
And we sort of made this list with the help of our DIT at the start.
Yeah.
And we sort of translated this into how we would resize stuff for Premiere and how we would resize stuff for After Effects.
Yeah.
So for the visual effects, I was turning over stuff to the VFX guys as After Effects projects because they pretty much worked in After Effects for most of this stuff. Yeah, so this is our like VFX. I know I'm kind of jumping back and forth.
It looks like you probably used an Airy Alexa.
Yes. Yeah, it was all Alexa, I think.
Yeah.
So that made it easier.
3.2K.
Yeah.
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 That made it easier, actually, because ProRes works really well with Premiere. So and our proxies were ProRes 422LT.
Yeah.
So going from ProRes to ProRes, it was actually pretty. That part was simple.
Yeah.
So this is our VFX list. Really, our VFX folder.
These aren't all the VFX, by the way.
Yeah, we had like 500 something shots. So yeah, we had like an individual folder for every single shot. And this was synced with our VFX artist through Resilio Sync. And it was a selective sync. So if I wanted to sync, one of these, for example, if I wanted to sync this with Ethan, I would just select this folder to sync with Ethan. So he wouldn't have to
too much with render.
Exactly. Yeah. So he wouldn't have to sync everything. He would see everything, but he would only get the data for that one shot that I want him to have. Yeah. So we were in direct communication with the VFX artist, and so were the Daniels, like the whole time. And it was good, like doing our VFX in-house. We didn't have to go through, complicated pulls and stuff like that.
So this is what
this is a VFX shot folder template. Like. So more specifically, this is it also. So I would turn over a version 0 of a project file, which is essentially just the shot prepped in an After Effects project with all the speed ramping built in as keyframes, so they didn't have to worry about doing any of that. I would just get that information from Premiere, make a few adjustments here and there. But After Effects, we found, was actually very precise with if we have a lot of speed ramps, we know exactly what frame is going to fall.
Yeah. So we actually ended up sending a lot of speed change like clips to Premiere to After Effects to finish it up.
Yeah. So and these were our assets. These are sort of elements that go in the foreground. In the case of this shot, these were our plates down here. Oops, where's the cursor? Okay, there we go. These are our plates, and here's like an edit reference down here as well. So, in this case, the cut changed the shot twice. So there's 2 edit references, both with the date, so they know exactly which one's the latest version. And here's the aspect ratio at the bottom, because we had so many of those. And yeah, we used that VFX cheat sheet for VFX as well as while we were onlining stuff in Premiere.
Yeah. So I used the cheat sheet when I was prepping all the footage for Paul at the get-go.
I think I know you guys need to get out of here pretty quick, and I want to have a couple questions.
Yeah.
I'm going to repeat the questions so that it can be on audio for the recording. But I also want to say that I know that Adobe has a really good manual that's free to download about how to set up projects in Premiere. Would there be anything different you would do, given that you could have chosen any kind of technology, not because of the directors having experience with this? So what would you do different?
Use Lucid Link, which we kind of discovered later on. We started in it was kind of the Wild West of the pandemic, and due to budgetary reasons, we were kind of limited at the time as to what we could use, and so I think using Lucid Link would have really helped us.
And if I have to work with the Daniels, say if the directors are still Daniels and the movie is still this heavy, crazy, I would probably still choose Premiere, because I know it gives the editors and the creators the most amount of space for them to be. I know it's crazy for me, but since I've gone through it, I know how to do it. So I would probably still give them the space to be creative. If it's a different director who the film isn't this crazy, more traditional, maybe I'll choose Avid because it's just very stable. Yeah.
Different horses for different courses, I guess.
Yeah.
How did you get the job? What were your best qualities that stood out?
Well, I actually was the first one to be interviewed, to be honest with you. And I think what eventually made them hire me was how technical I was. Because I think the Daniels and the Paul were very honest with me. They were telling me, Zoe, we're kind of messy.
They love that, by the way.
They love that, by the way.
They're very proud of it.
Yeah, it's flexible for these guys.
Yeah, but I think the messiness is how their brain works and how they get to their creativity. So, they asked me a lot of questions related to Premiere. How I know, do I know how to use it? And at the beginning, when I thought it was going to be single project, so they were asking me, do you know how to fix the duplicate situation in Premiere? I was telling them very specific things oh, I know we can use the XMPs to give each clip an individual code, or I can always archive. I guess I would just give very detailed answers to whatever their question is.
They were technical enough to understand what you're talking about.
I think so, and I think that's eventually what made them hire me.
Did you do live or on Premiere?
Dynamic link.
Did you use dynamic link?
We did not use dynamic link because by the time we started dealing with VFX, which was actually pretty early in the process, but we were still remote. So I was kind of worried that would mess up stuff, and I didn't really have the time to experiment. But it did help, using After Effects with Premiere in that I would make a project for every single VFX shot and import the VFX plates with all the speed ramps, everything into that project in Premiere. And then I would import that as a Premiere project into After Effects. So it definitely helped in translating a lot of the data. A lot of temp effects that Paul and the Daniels would do in the edit would come through in After Effects. Have to do a little bit of tweaking and stuff, but by and large it was there. But no, we didn't use dynamic link in this case. I was just really worried about the remote situation.
And just to add on it, if you want to use the dynamic link, I highly recommend you do that when you're on a shared server, like on an Nexus or something, because to make sure the dynamic link is stable, it would be great, like, you don't move them around. Like, they always stay there at one spot. And also, like, I've tried it. Like, you try to keep your dynamic link, like, projects, like, very, very organized. But after you change it a couple of times, like, you double-click open, that project just get really, really messy. So if you can put them at a one spot that you don't have to really look at them, so even if they're messy, they're not going to mess up with your project, that would be the best. For our case, because we were work off of our local drives, so we didn't trust the stability of it.
Well, thank you, guys. I'm so impressed with the movie. I know that you're going to be really busy because this director's going to be busy, the editor's going to be busy, and I know that he has a great team now. So congratulations on all the success, and thank you for coming in today.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you. Thanks, guys.